I'm an only child, so there was a lot of alone time as a kid. And the camera was like my salvation. It was like it gave me a purpose when that was really hard for me because I felt really lonely for a long time in my life because there was something that I was aware of about myself that I didn't even know how to speak about. I didn't know how to describe it because I didn't know what it was, and gives us this amazing power of empathy towards one another. And ultimately, I think it makes us some of the strongest people. And when we start showing up visually, because we understand that that is not a box that we belong in, then that teaches everybody outside of our community something about what it means to, choose yourself, stand up for yourself, empower yourself.
This is the Transparency Podcast Show.
Welcome back to Transparency Podcast Show. I'm your host, Sophie Chang. As we all know, in our trans community, taking photos, having pictures, taking selfie is a huge part of our culture because every time when we go out, party, and dress up, we want to keep it memory or like a document of picture or even kind of sort of like a journal. So today, our guest today, she's a photographer and she is bringing LGBTQ plus community into a different level. It's going to be into a fashion industry because we need our representative and we need our voice, we need our image, we need our face to be on the mainstream fashion world. So let me introduce you, Sophie Kietzmann. Hi, Sophie.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm so good. How are you?
I'm good. Just to let our audience know, her pronouns is they, right? They and them. So,
yes.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, like growing up and how you express yourself in photography or any personal discovery of your you consider yourself non-binary, correct?
Yes, I consider myself non-binary and queer as well, but that was not always the case growing up. I grew up in Berlin, Germany, and in Brussels and Belgium for most of my life. And I moved to New York City like 5 years ago to pursue my career as a photographer. And I came out after I moved here because I didn't really have community in Berlin. Like I didn't really have access to that part of my identity. So that came a little bit later. And I came out as queer first, and then as non-binary a little bit later.
Okay. So did you came here by yourself? Your family is still in Germany?
Yeah.
Did they know you came out?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And now they support it and everything, right?
They're very supportive.
Okay.
This past year, I took my mom to Berlin Pride for the first time. She loved it.
That's awesome.
It was a very proud moment.
Okay. So, what about your photography? Do you are you already always interested in photos, images, or is this all like come later when you kind of change your identity?
Photography came first. I started doing photography when I was 7.
Wow.
Yeah. My dad was a hobby photographer, and I'm an only child, so there was a lot of alone time as a kid. And the camera was like my salvation. It was like it gave me a purpose when I was alone, and I had nobody to play with. And photography was like, I don't know, then I could run around alone for hours or with my parents and still like have something to do,
Right.
And so I always stole my dad's camera. And then when I was 9, he gave me one of his old ones, and it was like, it just clicked, and it has been like such a huge part of myself for my entire life. Like I don't really know my life without photography.
Okay. And did he like teach you how to use it, or did you
Yeah.
just, oh, really? So,
Yeah.
okay.
I
Can
mean,
you,
I went to college for it later too, but he showed me all of the like basics and stuff. And when he bought me my first DSLR, he would make these like spreadsheets of, because then it's like operating a computer, so you have lots of elements of a camera, like the ISO and the shutter speed and the aperture, like when you really want to know what you're doing, and they're all related, and they all have ratios to one another. So he would like, I was like 15, and he would make these spreadsheets and he would quiz me on it so that I knew them by heart.
okay. So I'm a little bit old school. So I want to ask you this. Have you experienced the real film camera?
Yes,
So
yes.
how about go in a dark room and develop? Have you done
Yes.
that? That's so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
because
love.
I took that in college too. So it's very
Yeah,
fun
me too.
experience. Yeah. So in our digital world, we don't have to do a development anymore. So
Yeah.
do you see the quality difference, or pretty much the same, or do you think digital can give you more creative, like, you can Photoshop and all that apps and AI stuff?
I love both, I have to say. For work, I tend to use more digital these days just because there's, always this risk element with analog that something can go wrong.
Okay,
But I
true.
love both. I think analog gives you a different approach, because you can't take hundreds of photos. You have to be very like precise about
Right.
what you're capturing, and it's a little
Exactly.
bit slower too. But I think there's such an amazing nostalgic quality, and there's something about the granularity of photos when they're on film. It's like it feels like you can touch it. And sometimes with digital, we try to recreate that, but yeah, I think like to a certain degree, sometimes it feels a little more disposable, right? If you can take 1,000 pictures.
Right. And I still like to feel the print, actually, because we
Yeah.
take so many and save it on the cloud, and it's there forever. But when you print it out and you see it, you feel different. That's how I personally felt. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
now,
agree with you.
yeah. Okay. So now I want to ask you, why you want to come out, and then why you want to speak out and represent LGBTQ plus community through your images and your talents and your work.
I love that question. Well, I came out when I was 22 when I moved to New York City. And I didn't know that I was queer up until that point in my life. Like I knew that something was different about me, but I was very boxed in and very closeted, and I didn't really have access to that part of my identity growing up. And later then I realized that that also had a lot to do with me not seeing a lot of people like myself, like
Right.
especially in photography, but in the media world in general. But me being a photographer, like I was so in love with fashion and beauty and like fashion magazines and stuff like that. And none of the people back then that were represented were queer or non-binary presenting, or women that had more masculine aspects that they were embracing about themselves, or at least there wasn't enough for me to
Right.
really understand that that was an option for me.
Right.
So I was completely blind to it growing up, and that was really hard for me because I felt really lonely for a long time in my life, because there was something that I was aware of about myself that I didn't even know how to speak about. I didn't know how to describe it because I didn't know what it was, And then I came to New York City to become a freelance photographer. And when I came out and I was surrounded by my community for the first time, I realized that that was a big part of it, because I hadn't seen the people
Right.
that were all of a sudden in my life.
Right.
And so I already had this tool of photography. Like I went to college for photography, I had a degree in photography. But what was still missing was like a bigger reason why I wanted to be a photographer. And then when I came out, I realized, well, that could be my why, because if I photograph these people that are now like my chosen family, that are people that I actually feel like I belong with. If I can photograph those people, then that felt so purposeful to me. Like, I think some of the younger people now, they have so much more access to visually identify with some of the material that we have online.
Right.
But in comparison, it's still such a small percentage. And I feel like what I do is like a drop in an ocean of how much we need this. So that was the motivation for that.
Yeah. When you mention, the media that we have nowadays, it kind of make my thinking flash back to when I was my teens or early 20s. We don't have internet yet. We just have magazines. And now I'm just thinking, I was like looking at teen magazine, 16 magazine is all women's magazine, by the way.
Yeah.
And then Victoria's Secret just came out around that time, and they have catalogs. So I remember, I don't see any Asian in there. That's the first thing. Second, everyone is so skinny and, perfect body and all that. So, fast forwarding, funny thing is that when I recently read a book, it's called It. I'm not sure if you heard of it. It Cosmetic is by Jamie Carlanima. She is the owner, and then she invented this brand. And when she tried to pitch her cosmetic to those mainstream cosmetic industry, and her appearance is not aligned to the magazine that I just described, so they turn her down right away. They say, nobody. That's their word. Nobody want to buy cosmetic from you looking like this. So it's very brutal. So fast forwarding. So nowadays we see Asian people, but I still feel it's kind of stereotyping, because when they stereotyping, then the audience that are looking at it will start assuming, because if you really pay close attention, if Asian model, male or female, they all has chinky eyes like this, right? You don't see any other. We have big eyes too, So but and also we start having transgender model representing, from I do read from Victoria's Secrets, and also the It Cosmetic also started using trans model, so that's a great thing. So what do you see? I'm just giving you some of my perspective, but I want to hear from you, like representation and versus traditional media, TV, film, or even social media. What do you take on that?
I watch a lot of representation teeter on this verge of like tokenism, like you said. It's they take one person and they make them stand for a whole community, or they think that just because they've ticked that box that they can now call themselves diverse, or that's good enough, And so I think it's a very fine line between true representation and just putting somebody on a pedestal in order to uphold appearances, And for me, that difference in my day-to-day job, I see that difference in who is in the team, It's not just who's the model, but who is the photographer, who are the assistants, who are the creative directors, how diverse are the teams within the brands that are then putting forward these pictures that millions of people consume. Because I think it makes a difference, like the first shift we saw was just putting different models in front of the camera, but behind the camera, it still looked exactly the same. And it was all white, hetero, it was all one type of person. And I think it makes a huge difference in how the people look in the pictures too, like if you're a transgender model, but there's not a single other trans person on set, you're going to feel very different. You're going to feel a lot more exposed and vulnerable in this like very visual position, right? Because you're the only person that's whose face is going to be on the billboard in the end.
Right.
You're taking on that position, that role. Yes, you're taking on a representational role, but it shouldn't be tokenistic in a sense that you're constantly forced into rooms where you're still the minority, where you still feel marginalized.
Yeah. So, I, like what you just said, I did some film project about 10 years ago. And just like you described, everybody, well, there's some Asian actor, actress, but I'm the only trans person. It's very, to be honest, it's very scary to me.
Were you in the film too?
Yes, that project I was hired as an actress to be in the film as a she. They call it ladyboy, female. So, but that was Asian term, but we don't use that term anymore, so that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my next question is, as I described before, because from our trans community, we love to take pictures. So from personally myself, like when I first started, I don't know how to pose for pictures. I don't even know how to, look good or what side looks good as a woman, But slowly when I see myself on the screen, and then I can kind of make adjustments. So how, as a photographer yourself, how images can transform a person's self perceptions or even confidence within the community?
Well, I think the space that is being provided for you when you're in front of the camera makes a huge difference. Like most people, actually, I would say everybody, like it's a quite an unnatural position to be in when you're being photographed, because it almost is this impression of like you have all these eyes on you, and most people think that they need to be somebody else or act differently than they usually do in order to look their best. And I think what can help for people to really actually show up authentically is if they have somebody that makes them feel really comfortable, and if the space feels safe. And like I said, that includes the team that is there.
Right.
And then for me as a photographer, I try to bring a lot of vulnerability on set myself. Like I try to no matter what I'm asking of my models, I model myself so I know exactly what it can be like and how like insecure it can make you feel. So I give a lot of guidance and I give a lot of encouragement. And ultimately, I really want to people to realize that who they are is so beautiful when they feel safe and when they feel seen and when they feel empowered. And I think it takes humility and vulnerability from my side to not impose my expectations onto the person that's in front of the camera, but just more to take a step back and just guide the person through the process and tell them like, you look great, like you're already doing amazing. And then everything else is just practice. And then I tell them, what to do. I tell you which angle looks good. And like, that's what I'm there for, right? Because I'm the one that can see through the camera. So I can see what looks good. So I will tell you, you know?
Yeah. So that's a very, very great advice. So in the term of image, because or visual, because we all know our world change, all cater to videos and photos, visual. So even for marketing purpose and business, everybody is using visual to make the connection to communicate. So in let's say in fashion world, do you see any change the connection between the communication between their target audience coming from photos or videos, visualizing?
This episode is brought to you by Kitcaster. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. How do funded startup founders attract prospects and talent? Podcast interviews. How do entrepreneurs with exits find new deals? Podcast interviews. How do C-suite execs differentiate in crowded markets? Podcast interviews. Kitcaster books you on top podcasts. Click the link in the show notes for a special offer. Celebrate good conversation.
Yeah, I do see it changing. I see brands understanding that consumers these days, they don't just want to see, the skinny, blonde, like super beauty, like classical beauty, like Western world beauty standard. Because most of us aren't that, and it doesn't feel good to just see that and be told only if you're this, then you're good enough. So now I see it shifting where consumers want to see people that they identify with because it actually makes us feel good, like whether that's different body shapes, different gender expressions, like cellulite or skin conditions, or different ages too. Like I think ageism is a huge problem in the fashion industry that is just starting to get tackled. Like I rarely ever see older models being uplifted as much as youth is,
Right. Yeah. So when you mentioned aging, it's funny. My last photo shoot, the professional photo shoot, and I participated. It's called something like all women over 40. So I'm in a room with every different type of woman, and I'm representing trans women, and everyone is over 40, and it was a very fun and eye-opening experience, like you just said, because we don't see that on the mainstream. That we see, like a mature model. Yeah. So, and like I like how you say when you say it make the connection and influence, and the audience can relate to your brand. Yeah, that's so we have so many influence out there these days. So do you think, what do you think about image can or your photographic can be influence on part of this influencing world or society that we have right now?
Well, I think seeing an image that you yourself can identify with, especially in the fashion and beauty industry, can change our whole self-perception, because ultimately we do perceive commercial imagery, like images that are selling an item of clothing or like a beauty product or something. We perceive that as a platform for society at large, like you see somebody on a billboard or you see somebody in an advertisement and you recognize that there is a brand and that there's a lot of people standing behind this person showing up visually, right? So, when you think back, like it used to be like the biggest thing to be a model or to be in a magazine or be on a runway or be in a commercial. And I think we still perceive it that way. And I think that's why it's 1,000 times even more important that the people that are still somewhat marginalized in our society get uplifted and put onto that platform, but also integrated into that very coveted world. Because it still, to a lot of consumers, feels like if I'm being put in this campaign, then I'm being shown as good enough to society. And unfortunately, that's just how most consumers perceive it. So if that's how it's being perceived, then everybody needs to be let into that. Everybody needs to be given access to this. And everybody needs to be represented in that industry. And I would really love to be that bridge, because I already had my foot in the door to this industry. I already had the tool belt of, being a photographer. And now from my personal story, like I come from a marginalized community and I understand what it takes for individuals like me that are going to be in these campaigns for it to be done right and for them to be protected and for their identity to be respected, know?
That's right. Kudos to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So before we go to the last question, so where can people find you? If somebody want to search your work or follow you, where can people find you?
Yes, people can look at my website or find me on Instagram. It's just Sophie Kietzmann. It's my first and last name. And for anybody that's listening now that is realized that maybe they haven't stepped into their own visual power yet, I would love to be that person that gives them access to this, and they can contact me. And that is one of my biggest aims in what I do, is to give people this experience that there is space for them to visually feel like they're good enough and be confident. And then when you have that documented, you can look at these photos and realize like, oh, I deserve to be seen. I deserve to show myself.
Right.
I think that can really change the way we perceive ourselves and
Right.
and make you a lot more confident. I would love for your audience, if anybody in your audience feels like that's something that they might want to experience for themselves. I'd love to be that person.
Thank you so
I can help
much.
them do that.
Yeah, thank you for doing that for everyone.
course.
So the last question will be, because when you reach out to me and you tell me your purpose, your whole goal of speaking out is very touching, personally to myself, and it kind of I kind of related to just like what we're all talking about. I can relate to because your photography, and I learned of TV films, and then I was also in modeling 10 years ago for fun. So I can relate so much, and all the things you just mentioned, I can 100% see the change different because let's say in trans world before Caitlyn Jenner, it's kind of, you don't hear anybody or any model or actress that's trans, but after her, then it kind of opens the door.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you this. I usually give our interviewer guests to have their own thoughts, their own words, whatever they want to say or express to Transparency podcast audience. Yeah.
Okay. Let me make this a good one.
Okay. Yeah. Take your time.
I think to anybody from our community, one of the things I think that gives us the greatest solidarity is this understanding of what the experience is like to grow up in a world where society hasn't made space for oneself yet. I think we all know what that feels like to a certain extent, to not be held space for, to not be given space, or to not have access to recognizing yourself in the people around you or in the media that we consume. And as painful as an experience like that can be, I think it gives us this amazing power of empathy towards one another. And ultimately, I think it makes us some of the strongest people.
Yes.
And when we start showing up visually, because we understand that that is not a box that we belong in, then that teaches everybody outside of our community something about what it means to, choose yourself, stand up for yourself, empower yourself, and, don't hide. And our world is so media dominated. So that's a space that we 100% belong in.
Wow. So awesome. I have goosebumps for many times. Seriously. So I want to thank you for coming on to the show, and we will definitely follow up with your journey, because I really think you should come back again and share your progress, your journey. And if you ever come if you ever come to California, LA, we're gonna.
I'll definitely come say hi to you. Yes, have to.
Okay. Yeah.
So nice for you to have me. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and we'll look out for your amazing work. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye, Sean.
Bye.